Welcome to Self-Hacked Radio, where cutting-edge science meets cutting-edge health. Hello everybody, I am here with Steve Fowkes. He is an organic chemistry major from Reed College. He is the CEO of Nano Polymer Systems, a material science company located in California. He blogs on Project Wellbeing. He's the director of Cognitive Enhancement Research Institute. He's been a health consultant for many years, and he's been self-hacking for 40 years. And he's definitely one of the biggest experts in biochemistry, nutrition, and just how to feel optimally well. All right, so the first topic I want to talk about is the circadian rhythm. What do you do to set it, how you measure it, and how do you take care of your own circadian rhythm?
It's a great topic. It's something that I've been researching for many decades, and one of my first introductions to it was, of course, being a night owl, being born a night owl. All through my childhood, staying up late was easy. Waking up in the morning was very, very difficult, and I never really had an explanation. I just kind of thought that that's the way things were supposed to be. When I started studying, pH rhythms, I started recognizing that there was an underlying tide that I could actually identify, and it didn't really help me control my night owl syndrome much at all. But over the years, I was able to hack things with, for example, taking melatonin before going to sleep at night, using caffeine and sugar in the morning when I woke up, which was my default strategy, which is highly dysfunctional, which then I would graduate to things like paracetam in the morning, or eggs in the morning, or something like sausage, which would be aged meat or aged cheese, which would help me with that early morning startup. And now I'll even do Dave Asprey's bulletproof concept of putting MCT oil into something that I consume first thing in the morning to jumpstart my metabolism. I've considered using at different times thyroid hormone and low-dose adrenal hormones. The thyroid works great for me. The adrenal hormones didn't at all.
So you take thyroid hormones now?
Intermittently.
Intermittently, okay.
That's my latest fad, is intermittent everything.
Okay, you're not afraid that it's going to mess up with your own production of thyroid hormones? That's what I'm afraid of when I'm thinking about it.
It is if you do whole thyroid or T4, but if you do low-dose T3, it doesn't really mess with anything but setting your circadian rhythm. It's kind of like, having a gauge that's the needle stuck and you just tap the gauge to unstick the needle, and low-dose T3 is so fast acting that it doesn't really mess with the TSH feedback loop.
Oh, that's interesting. But doesn't it decrease TSH? It's going to decrease TRH because that's how the feedback loop goes. TRH,
that's
TSH,
right.
T4, T3, and then
but T3 doesn't do that because it's too fast acting.
So then
it's operating on a time scale of, let's say, 3 hours, and as opposed to T4, which would be 12 hours. So it's over and done so fast that the neuroendocrine system doesn't really recognize it as a change of set point. It's rather just an anomaly, and therefore you're getting this metabolic push in the early morning hours when, if you're a night owl, your metabolism is slow and you're still carrying on the nighttime phase of metabolism, and you need that jump start to get the morning going rapidly so that you'll fall asleep earlier but later that day.
So you're saying the T4 is mainly what has negative feedback to the TRH?
Well, it's not so much, I think, T4 or T3. They're working on the same receptors. I think it's the duration of action. When you take T4, you're going to have a suppression of your thyroid system over a 12-hour period. Well, an augmentation of the thyroid level will go up for 12 hours, and the body will say, that's a deviation from homeostasis, we're going to shut it down, and your TSH cycle will, through your hypothalamus to your pituitary, and will shut it down. Whereas if you do, let's say, 5 micrograms of T3 at 4 in the morning, it's just going to be a blip in the day.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and you're talking about setting your circadian rhythm with that, and it's just fascinating how many things can set the circadian rhythm that I'm reading about. One of them is TRH is actually, I think I've been reading more about how TRH sets the circadian rhythm more by spiking, let's say, at 3 or 4 a.m. rather than T4, but you're using T4, T3 to kind of set your circadian rhythm in some way.
Well, I use the T4, T3 combination to reset my metabolic systems and not my rhythm. The T3 is better at setting rhythm. But, you know, you're talking about pretty much anything that you can do. If you get up in the morning and exercise, you're altering your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So this is not just a handful of inputs.
It's everything, really.
It's pretty much everything. Yeah.
Right.
Whether you eat carbs for breakfast or you eat fat for breakfast has a huge difference. And so if you're a night owl, eating fat for breakfast makes sense. And if you're a lark, eating carbs for breakfast makes sense.
How does that work exactly? Why is fat, why would that work if you're eating fat for breakfast?
Well, if you're in fat burning mode, it's about energy. There's a kind of lowered energy at night, which is analogous to hibernation. Okay, we do that. We don't hibernate as mammals, but we do have our nighttime metabolism, which is low, and during the day goes up and down and up every day, and that transition from low to high is delayed in somebody who's a night owl and is early in somebody who's a morning lark. So if you slow down that transition, somebody has their metabolism is revving up and they're a morning lark, if you slow that down, it will extend their circadian rhythm.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting.
So quick burning fat in the morning, like coconut oil or MCT oil, overrides the normal carnitine switch in the mitochondria that would otherwise potentially limit your fat burning. So you can override the system, and if you do coconut oil or MCT oil in the morning, you're going to get a surge of energy, which if you're laggardly in your metabolism will be perceived as beneficial, and if you're overactive in your metabolism will spike you and crash you later in the day.
Oh, that's interesting. So would you say somebody who's, let's say, has issues with being overweight, their metabolism is going to be slower, and somebody who's thin and having problems gaining weight, their metabolism is going to be quicker? Would you say that's true? It sounds like it would be true.
Way too many exceptions to believe.
Right. Okay, yeah. Because I've been historically pretty fit, and I actually don't do well with coconut oil for some reason. Even though it seems like if you look on just people's experiences, they do well with coconut oil.
I think that probably means your carnitine is working very well.
That I don't do well with coconut oil? Oh, if
right.
you do, or if you do.
If you're a good and gracious fat burner, you're less likely to respond positively to coconut oil because you're already burning long chain fat. So you get a flood of medium chain fat that revs you up, and your body will go, whoa, that's too much. Whereas the average person has got carnitine problems and insulin resistance problems, and so turning on the fat burning systems or temporarily facilitating the fat burning systems is a positive thing.
Okay, that's okay. So I've actually had different ideas, and it's like, whoa, okay, one second, where do we start here? I thought my carnitine system. Okay, so naturally, I normally have more muscle, so I don't really work out much or very little, and I'm pretty muscular. So I happen to think, but what I found is that, and I do have energy in general when I'm not consuming too much saturated fat, but when I do consume a lot of saturated fat, especially not MCTs, but coconut oil, which has a lot of lauric acid, is not really an MCT. Doesn't function as, if you just buy MCT oil, especially on me. The lauric acid, I think, is actually a long chain, but maybe it's shorter than other long chains. But what I found is that when I consume too much saturated fat, I don't feel like I can burn it for some reason. And my theory is that maybe my mitochondria is not working that well, or somehow it's also clogging my muscles, because normally I'm active, I could walk for a really long time, and when I consume a lot of saturated fat, I feel like my muscles become more clogged, and they unclog when I actually take carnitine. So if I took a lot of carnitine, like 2 grams of acetylcarnitine, that pretty much goes away. So that's why I'm saying that I think something's going on for whatever reason, metabolizing things in different ways. But when I take carnitine, it actually makes any issues that I have from coconut oil go away.
That's right, because you're overriding your homeostatic system that's reacting to the fat. Your body would be saying, okay, there's too much energy, and it'll shut down your carnitine to attempt to regulate that. And when you take carnitine, you're overriding that regulatory loop.
Oh, I haven't thought about that. So you're saying I'm good with carnitine. It's just that since it's so active, if I increase saturated fat, it's too much energy, and my system is saying, okay, shut down.
That's right.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't think.
Yeah, carnitine
like
is subject to a control loop, just like insulin and just like growth hormone. All of these things have feedback loops. Thyroid hormone, they have feedback loops, and if you override the system temporarily, your body will counteract that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is even, for example, alcohol. How many of us remember the first time we drank alcohol? Where you got twice the bang for your buck. And then, relatively quickly, your alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme becomes adapted to drinking alcohol, and you need twice as much alcohol to get the same kind of effect. I did that with B5 in college, where I took a gram of B5 suddenly and had an amazing strength and stamina issue that happened that was never again reproducible. Once my body learned how to handle the extra pantothenic acid, it was just like, okay, done. I can't override that system again.
I actually also got a decent boost from B5, but I don't know if it's continuing. I'm taking other stuff, so it's hard to really measure what it's doing, but I really would like to maybe megadose and see if I am getting a good effect from that still, or I don't really take it. I take a more of a lower dose just to make sure I'm getting enough of it.
That's right, and that's what I think is the wise strategy for most of the supplements that are out there. B complex vitamins, for example, or doing minerals, and that you want to prevent a deficiency as your primary strategy rather than override the system.
Right.
Antioxidants, for example, was probably one of the biggest judgment mistakes that I ever made in my entire career, was a misunderstanding of how antioxidants work. And
I think the rest of the scientific community in the 80s and 90s did the same thing. So
yes, and I got caught up in that
exactly.
and didn't question it enough. But antioxidants are like musical instruments in an orchestra. There's a certain balance of musical instruments for a particular piece of music, and there is the same thing in humans. And so if you put 10 tubas into an orchestra, it's not going to be better.
Exactly.
But if you're missing a tuba and it's a Sousa piece, then putting a tuba into it is going to make it much better. So that's the problem with a lot of these nutrients and antioxidants, is that you don't want to drive them past their set point unless you have a metabolic insufficiency based on, let's say, a polymorphism.
Right.
So if you have, let's say, schizophrenia genes running in your family and you need higher than RDA level of B complex vitamins, then you want to override the system. But in general, for antioxidants and things like, let's say, bioflavonoids, you want adequacy and broad spectrum as your strategy.
Okay, and let's go back to the night owl versus the daytime, because that's we really barely touched the circadian rhythms. So I'm naturally a night owl, and you were saying that a night owl should get more fat in the day?
No, more fat in the morning.
More fat in the morning. That's what I meant. In the day,
jumpstart your metabolism in the morning. That's the feature that makes you a night owl, is that your metabolism is slow to get going in the beginning of the day.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I wouldn't take coconut oil because I don't do well with it, but I do well with MCT oil. So
that's right.
So
that would be a great way to boost your metabolism. Caffeine, for example, is a thermogenic agent. So taking something that's uncouples your mitochondria slightly so that you get a bigger surge in your metabolic rate in the early morning hours. So if you were to do that same thing at the other end of the day, it would be make your night owl syndrome worse.
That's interesting. I actually do. I have been doing that for the past, especially 6 months. I've been boosting my metabolism in the day because I guess I didn't think of it in the same terms as you, but I wanted to increase my metabolism in the day, allow more adenosine to build up, and also set my circadian rhythm for the daytime. So one of the things that sets circadian rhythm is cyclic AMP. So I started maybe exercising more in the morning, taking forskolin, luteolin, things that will raise cyclic AMP in the morning, kind of shifting that all to the daytime, or any stimulants I take, definitely in the morning. So, yeah.
A good example might be taking a shower in the morning. You get exposed to negative ions, the superoxide catalyzes your metabolism. It's not to say that doing the same thing at night would be counterproductive, because the superoxide would be catalytic for making serotonin and melatonin, and therefore you'd get a potential sleep enhancing effect. One of the things that I find very interesting that is an opposing trend to medicine is the internet allows people with a class of disease to get together and share on the internet. And one of the things that I've observed in the thyroid groups is that people are now starting to take thyroid hormone before they go to bed at night and getting better quality sleep. That's very counterintuitive from the standard medical model. But when you realize that low metabolic rate impairs both daytime metabolism and nighttime metabolism, you might want to split up your thyroid hormone 2/3 in the morning and 1/3 in the evening, or 3/4 in the morning and 1/4 at night, in order to make sure that you don't end up with a energy crisis in the middle of the night when your metabolism is normally dropping down. If you have a thyroid problem, it goes down too low, and a whole variety of pathologies happen at night when you're sleeping, when you're supposed to be healing. I have the same exact experience. I used to take, and I used to recommend this as well, like honey, because people are getting hypoglycemic at night sometimes. So I used to take honey, collagen, a whole bunch of things. For the past couple months, I've been experimenting with nothing. So I've been increasing my calories in the daytime. And it turns out that it actually works better for me, but only at this stage, whereas before it wouldn't have. I kind of built up my mitochondria over time. I've been doing other things, increasing my metabolism. And so I think that effect goes with you throughout the night, and I don't get hypoglycemic at night. Instead, I get more of a daytime spike in energy. So I'll wake up feeling more refreshed if I'm keeping to my circadian rhythm, which is not so easy for me. But if I am in a good rhythm, then I will wake up feeling, a rush of energy instead of sluggish and whatever. It takes me a half hour to really get into the swing of things. So yeah, that's very interesting. So you're saying that sleep is a really good way to monitor your circadian rhythm.
Right. Yeah. If people's sleep is not working, then that means their circadian rhythm is shit. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah. And metabolically and temporally. So the night owl syndrome, the degree to which it gets worse for you would be a good marker of whether you're making the right moves or not, and how rested you feel is an issue of whether you're optimizing that nighttime metabolic state, and how much energy and strength and stamina you have is for monitoring the daytime part of your metabolism. So, this is all part of the quantified self approach and self-care approach, is paying attention to what your body's talking to you about and learning its language.
That's why I'm so into, it's one of the reasons why I'm so into the circadian rhythm, because that could really, if you set it right, that could have so many positive effects, and that could also tell you how you're doing with your health. It's more of a sensitive indicator, I feel. If you're not waking up with a nice burst of energy, that's saying something is not 100% right.
That's right.
And so conventional medicine will just say, some people are just naturally night owls. I think that we're more, some people are more inclined to be night owls. I don't think that's the natural state of human history. The sun goes down, you're not a night owl.
No, I think it's an aberration that is caused by a bunch of different factors in our society, and the least of which is probably just light.
Light at night, exactly. Yeah, Exactly. So how long before when do you cut off the light? And do you wear amber or red glasses? Like, do you cut off the blue and green, or do you just cut off the blue spectrum?
I just add red.
So you don't.
I mean, I have my monitor set to, warm up as the evening goes on. It's an automatic program, but
F-Flux?
I do. I just add red light to mitigate any blue that's in my environment.
Oh, so you don't even block off blue light?
That's right.
That's really interesting.
I just overwhelm it with red.
I wonder. Okay, so yeah, I've definitely heard this concept where red kind of slows down your circadian rhythm and blue speeds it up.
Well, I think it's about the timing of it. If you, blue light in the middle of the day and red light at the beginning and end of the day, that this is merely us, using artificial technology to mimic our natural environment.
Right. You're not concerned about blue light at night, even because you are stimulating your suprachiasmatic nucleus with blue light.
I don't have, complex fluorescence or regular fluorescence. I use, all incandescent light for the end of the day. There is some blue in it, but it's not enough that I worry about it. So,
Okay, that's interesting. I've seen a study where, so I didn't worry about, let's say, tiny amounts of artificial lighting coming in. I live in New York City, so you are getting that from the outside. But then I read a study where they said that even very dim light, like 5 lux, is enough to throw off your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
And that's what scared me. That's what I'm like, you got to cut out all blue light. What do you think about that? Is that
well, I have to say that each of us come with our sensitivities. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to be aware of them, and it's nice to be tolerant and forgiving of them, and not to be in objection to our own natures.
Okay, but
so Dave Asprey, for example, he's the canary in the mine shaft regarding mold. And that's his thing. I don't react to mold like that. I can't tell moldy beef from non-moldy beef.
I can't either.
So it's, each of us have those kinds of things. And if you have a circadian rhythm, you see, I figured out a whole variety of things. Here I am talking to you at 7 a.m. my time. I'm a night owl. So I'm up and talking at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Well, so I figured out enough about my circadian rhythm to be able to do that. And one of the ways I do it is to use paracetam.
How much sleep are you getting? So if you're a night owl and you're also getting up at 6 a.m. or whatever, how are you doing that? You're getting less sleep?
At least 6 hours.
Okay, but you're not getting more than 6 hours?
Oh, no. I'm typically more 7 to 8.
7 to 8, okay. So you're not that much of a night owl then if you're waking up.
Night owl, in my opinion, night owl isn't about how much sleep you're getting. It's about when you get your sleep, and is it synchronized to a 24-hour cycle or not. And a night owl has a 25-hour cycle instead of a 24-hour cycle.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So it's not about how much sleep you get. It's about whether or not your sleep is functional or dysfunctional regarding your schedule, what it is that you have to do.
Right.
And if you have a meeting with some CEO at 9 a.m. in the morning and you're a night owl, you have a problem.
Right. So what time do you go to sleep and what time do you wake up usually?
Oh, it depends. I sometimes I'll go to sleep as early as, let's say, 9:30 in the morning at night, and sometimes it'll be midnight. So, when it gets to midnight, I go, okay, I need to do something. But, I do recognize that a lot of it is about productivity. My highly productive times are late morning and late evening, and that's when I excel. That's a typical night owl pattern. And so if I have a whole bunch of work to do, I'll play into that night owl syndrome to get the work done.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so I'm the same way. I'm kind of like, I'll go to sleep anywhere between 9:30 and maybe even 1. And when I go to sleep at after last night, it was 12:15. I'm like, damn, I gotta really move this back. That's why I mentioned before. It's really hard for me, even though I know how important it is. But right now, I'm putting all my focus on this. Like, stop working at 9 p.m. and just get ready for bed by 10. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's very hard because I am productive. Less productive than I used to be as I'm becoming more of a a daytime person, much less. But still, it's kind of, I don't know. In some ways, it's more conducive to productivity. People are sleeping, not that many distractions.
I often hear people say that kind of thing, and I doubt it. I doubt that anybody is capable of judging their productivity without some kind of independent metric. It's also the same thing about time. I'm one of those people for whom time is variable during the day, and at certain times time seems to drag, and other time seems to flow by really fast. And to the extent that I now, anytime I'm doing a food introduction study on myself, I'll use a metronome to standardize my time perception, because it's so variable that I can't trust it.
So when time slows
Likewise,
down,
my ability to recognize productivity in myself varies with my metabolic state. And so when I'm very productive, I don't see myself as being productive. It's because my perception of time has changed. So my ability to recognize myself is a fundamental problem that I have as a scientist.
Right. I think that some of that can maybe have to do with the level of self-awareness you have. But again, it's still, you want to measure it. How do you measure it with a metronome? So if time is slowing down, I assume, and you're less productive.
The metronome speeds up.
Okay, fine. And
subjectively.
Yeah, and so that's going to mean that you're sensitive to the food?
Right. So typically, the inflammation produces a quickening of mental processing. There's a general systemic acidification effect that's taking place that you can actually monitor in yourself with a simple vinegar test. Take some white distilled vinegar from a glass bottle and put a tablespoon or two in a glass of water and do the, sip, swallow, gulp, chug routine. And you can experience whether or not acidity will improve your mental focus and stuff like, let's say, coffee would. So coffee is producing the same kind of short-term stimulation. Smoking a cigarette does the same kind of thing. So sharpening the brain based on acidic effects versus sharpening the brain based on caffeine effects, very different kinds of mechanisms. And unless you take them apart, you don't know, if you're a coffee junkie, which one is operating for you. So
how does that work? How does that acidity sharpen your brain?
I can't say I know, all the mechanisms that are involved, but I certainly think that it's part of metabolic activation for survival reasons. So in other words, when you get scared, when you're in an unsafe environment, when the bear is going to eat you, that's your metabolism, your adrenal gland goes up, your metabolism jump starts, you all of a sudden have massive amounts of energy, and that includes a massive acidification shift. So you have CO2 and lactic acid, which are your primary metabolic acidifiers. That means your metabolic rate is controlling your acidity.
I actually have a mechanism for that. I just thought of it. Basically, orexin is the main metabolic neurotransmitter in the hypothalamus, and that activates by CO2 and lactic acid. So that's a sensor of your acidity, and when that activates, you become more awake, your metabolism increases, things like that. It has a whole bunch of effects on circadian rhythm, your gut flow, everything. So it
sympathetic
kind of
activation as opposed to parasympathetic. This certainly plays a major role in that. And so that acidification, that's the time when you need to outrun the bear, when something is threatening your life. And so being as maximally attentive and responsive is critical for that period of time. And so, I think we're wired to be that way.
Interesting with the acidity sharpening your brain. So how is the metronome going to, how can you use a metronome to see if you're sensitive to food?
If you adjust a metronome before you reintroduce the food, so you've done a washout, let's say for 2 weeks, with no wheat, rye, oats, or no tomatoes, or other nightshades, or whatever it is.
I would say the best is really to even do more of a kind of elemental diet, or a much more limited diet, because if you're sensitive to one food, you might might not pick it might not pick it up because you're still being sensitive to it. So if you cut out gluten and you're still sensitive to dairy, that's going to be off. So
but each antibody reaction that you will produce an independent acidification effect. So you can study them independently, even though if you've got 20 allergic foods and you're only dealing with one, you're only dropping it slightly.
Right.
But because you reintroduce that antigen in a small dose, in a very short period of time, your body hyper responds, and so you're looking at a blip where your body goes acidic and then alkaline rebound and then back to baseline again. And the metronome allows you to adjust to whatever state you're in. So, whatever clock speed your brain is working at, you adjust the metronome, you take 5 minutes, it's a little bit fast, okay, slow it down a little bit, it's dragging, you speed it up until it's a nice, smooth rhythm that is in harmony with you on some level. And maybe it's a double frequency or half frequency with your heartbeat or something like that. In my opinion, they're different. But then when you introduce the food, any change to your mental processing speed will cause the metronome to appear to be altered. So the metronome serves as an objective signal, and your perception of it is inverse to what's actually happening.
Okay, so I think I just have to buy a metronome and dig in and see what happens. Because it's hard to visualize exactly how it's going to work when I never used one.
So I do that with any kind of investigation into inflammatory triggers. Is to use a metronome and pulse. Monitor your pulse rate.
Oh, okay.
So you're getting both the mental subjective acidification mechanism and the adrenal sympathetic parasympathetic dynamic at the same time.
So if your heart rate goes up, that means you're sensitive to a food?
Yes.
Okay, I see. So that's
if it's plus or minus 5,
right. But if it's
you're in the noise.
Yeah. Okay. So but right, if it goes up by 10, then that means something.
Yes.
Okay.
If it goes up by 20, that's often what I see in people who are highly reactive to certain kinds of things.
That's interesting. So I'm actually going. I have a pulse oximeter. Those are cheap. $20-$30. You could just check that. I mean, I happen to notice when I'm sensitive to food, so I've been able to get rid of the food sensitivities just by noticing it. But having an objective, measurements is obviously better.
People have an ability to be self-aware on a whole bunch of different levels, and on the whole, though, we're pretty much oblivious to a lot of subtleties. Yeah. So, for example, when I'm doing urine pH testing, I'm measuring that CO2 lactic acid effect on an energetic level. But what I've learned is by studying pH that I can discriminate. I can teach myself what alkaline feels like and what acid feels like, and what acid momentum feels like and what alkaline momentum feels like, so that after I've done this, I don't need to test anymore.
Right.
I've now learned what my body's language is to recognize those kinds of things. Before, it was oblivious to it, and now I can feel that
Definitely.
It can be very useful for somebody who has a pH-related kind of pathology, like asthma or migraine headache, classic migraine headache. And once you use this as a biofeedback tool. Now that you've done that, you're now educated. You now speak one of the dialects of your body.
Right. So I measure my pH once in the blue moon, but actually I knew you're into pH, so I just said, let me test it today. And so I tested it in the morning right when I woke up. It was at an 8 actually. So it was pretty alkaline. And then I tested it a few hours later and it was 6. So
acid momentum.
Yeah, so that would tell you that based on what I've heard you say from a different interview, you were saying that in the night you're more alkaline, and so when you pee out, your urine is going to be more alkaline right when you wake up, or it should be. And then later on in the day, your metabolism is increasing, you're increasing your CO2, your acidity, and then you're going to pee out more acidic urine.
Yeah.
That's supposed to measure your circadian rhythm. It's supposed to be a good
It is
measure.
synchronized to your circadian rhythm with all kinds of noise caused by psychological state, by foods that you eat, and your environment, and supplements that you take. So all of that is producing oscillations, but the overall sinusoidal curve is reproducible and synchronized to your circadian rhythm. It defines your circadian rhythm on an energetic basis.
Right. So what would you say, like a 7 or 8 in the morning, and then lower as the second piss around? What does that indicate? Is that a good sign?
That's a good sign that you're a healthy night owl.
A healthy night owl. Okay, that's probably.
You see, if you were a
sense.
healthy lark, that 8 would have been something that you would be measuring right before you go to bed, and you'd wake up with a slightly more acidic urine.
Aha, I see what you're saying. Okay, that's very interesting. So
it also means that you've got good bladder control, that you could hold your urine all night without having to get up in the middle of the night and pee.
I actually do have good bladder control, and it wasn't always like that, but I definitely got better, as in I don't wake up in the middle of the night to urinate anymore, even if I drink.
Your first urination is an average of your entire night's pH effects, and so if it's 8, that means you're going very, very alkaline at some point during the night, which is a very, very healthy thing. 8's pretty severe. 7.5 would be more that I would consider normal healthy, or statistically normal healthy.
Right.
But it's not that unusual for somebody to go from 8 to 5, and 8 at night during their peak alkaline time, and 5 during the day, or 4.5, even 4 in some people who are doing peak performance athletics can hit 4 easily. That's
interesting. Okay, so yeah, I think normally I'm maybe 7.5 or something, but that's that. So you also measure it throughout the day, in the afternoon as well, or that's not as relevant?
Well, the only way you can really get your rhythm is if you measure it every time you pee.
Okay, fine.
So you need to connect all the dots to get the the shape of the curve. It's like cortisol. You can't do cortisol reliably unless you do it 4 times during the day.
Right. So you want to make sure it's wave-like or sinusoidal?
Yes.
Okay.
And forgiving yourself for eating toast and eating chocolate and drinking coffee and smoking a cigarette, all those kinds of effects that you might do during the day, having a whiskey at the end of the day or drinking a glass of wine that's going to mess with your pH. You're going to see those kinds of blips. When you exercise, is going to create a up and down cycle where you become more acidic and more alkaline. I do it that way, invert the pH unit, because I think of awake as being up and the sleep as being down. So I just orient it that way to make more intuitive sense for people. I find they really get it better when the pH scale is low numbers on the top and high numbers on the bottom.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, another big wrench obviously is how much water you're going to drink. So if you drink more water, your urine is going to be more alkalized, right?
Well, it depends on what the water that I have here is 6, 5.5 to 6. So depending upon where you get your water and how your water is treated, but on the whole, if the mineral content of your water is low, it's not going to affect your pH much at all.
Right, but if you add minerals to it,
it'll dilute your urine, but that's not a big effect.
So if you add minerals like magnesium and coral calcium or something like that, it should make your urine more alkalized?
Typically, magnesium makes you more acid.
Okay, and the calcium?
And citrus juice will make you more alkaline.
And what about like coral calcium?
I would say you're likely to be acidic unless there's something weird going on with your vitamin D and your vitamin K and things like that.
Okay.
But in general, calcium, magnesium are acidifying, and copper is acidifying, and things like zinc and iron and sodium and potassium are alkalinizing.
Okay, yeah, so I drink a lot of kombucha, especially in the morning, and the kombucha is acidic. Maybe I'll mix it with some apple cider vinegar as well.
Well, vinegar is a great way to acidify on a shallow level. If you want to just acidify your blood, vinegar is a great way to do it because it doesn't get deep into the body and doesn't have a major effect on your energy, but it does acidify. And so, as I said, that can be a mental focus and an issue of how you jumpstart yourself in the morning. You can use vinegar to do that.
So it's a good thing, especially in the morning, kombucha and vinegar, having more acidic foods to jumpstart metabolism.
It's just another way to self-medicate.
Yeah, right. What's the mechanism by which your urine is becoming more alkalized if you're consuming an acidic beverage or food, whatever? Oh,
because it's the metabolic ash, the pH stress to the bloodstream that you're seeing in your urine.
And then you're
basically
releasing
monitoring
calcium.
Kidney defending your blood pH. That's what urine is.
Okay, so you're increasing the if your blood becomes more acidic, you increase the calcium release, and then then the urine is going to become more alkalized. Is that what's happening?
No, well, the net acid forming or alkaline forming property of nutrients in foods operates at every level of the body, but certain things like, for example, magnesium is participating in a whole host of energy-related pathways.
Okay.
Okay, now, when I was first studying the work of Dr. Emanuel Ravisi, I found his periodic table to be fascinating because the first period metals, sodium, potassium, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, were all alkalinizing, and the second one, calcium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, were all acidifying.
In the urine or where?
Deep in at the cellular level.
How do you know it's what's doing at the cellular
level? Just
level?
by watching patterns and how people respond to different things. This is something that was developed independently. So Ravisi studied it by giving doses of these things to animals and then measuring the pH of a wound. Mm-hmm. And seeing the pH shift. But the Eastern medical people did it by studying all kinds of other kinds of clues in people in response to different kinds of foods. And so you look at the pH charts in the macrobiotic school and you compare them to the pH charts in Ravisi's school, and there's like 85% agreement between these two schools.
Okay.
So East meets West in terms of measuring something that's physiologically foundational, and on some level I just accept that without necessarily needing to know what the mechanism is, even though I have that kind of I got to figure this out kind of attitude.
Right. That's what's so confusing. It's like, well, how so you're saying what is acidic or what's alkalizing to the cell based on Ravisi's work and maybe traditional tradition, Eastern medicine, whatever,
and studying it in myself,
and studying. But
so
you
if
can
I
only
want to alkalize, and I do want to do it very easily and conveniently, citrus is a great way to do that.
And the way you're measuring that is based on how awake you feel, or your metabolic system, or like how much energy you're
all
producing,
of the above.
Or
urine
but not
pH,
urine
salivary
okay.
pH.
So your urine pH is increasing the cellular as well. How does that urine match up to?
You're not measuring the cellular compartment when
exactly.
you're doing urine pH. You're measuring the most superficial level. But if you do salivary pH, you're measuring it at the tissue level.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine.
So you can actually conveniently see two different levels. But measuring cellular pH and mitochondrial pH, we don't have the technology for doing that yet. So we have to make those inferences.
I see. So you're not doing it based on your urine. It's more of some subjective factors combined with maybe salivary pH?
Yes. So, once you've gone through the pH biofeedback cycle to figure out what it's like, you don't need to actually measure pH to know what's going on with your body. But when I do measure it, and I buy boxes of 10 pH papers.
Right.
I go through enough of it.
Right.
But it's not something for an average person to do, because it's about as invasive as you can get in terms of lifestyle.
Right.
Talking about measuring your pH every time you pee for 2 to 5 days at a time.
Right.
That's like, you have to change your life to do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in the mechanism by which different things are increasing the pH, but yeah, we can talk about that for who knows how long. So I'm just going to move on.
Well, there's other aspects of pH control involving sympathetic and parasympathetic systems that involve respiration. So expiring CO2 is a very powerful way to regulate your pH.
In your cell or
no, in your bloodstream.
In your bloodstream. Okay, yeah.
But it does create a pH gradient from your deep tissues to your, to your lungs.
I see. So you're going to exhale CO2, these acidity, the hydrogen ions or acidity in your cell is going to leak out into the bloodstream.
Right, and that set point is altered by your sympathetic parasympathetic imbalance. If you're sympathetic, you're going to be blowing off CO2 regardless of whether your muscles are producing it or not.
Right, because
if you're parasympathetic, you're not going to be blowing off CO2 even if your muscles are producing it.
Okay, yeah, just so I explain it to the listeners, sympathetic is more fight or flight, and what's happening is you're breathing less deeply. So
yes. Panting, shallow, rapid breathing.
And that's going to exhale more CO2. Rather, when you're parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, or more of a relaxed state, feed and breathe, they also call it. That's you're breathing more deeply and you're absorbing more CO2.
You're conserving more CO2. Yes.
You're
reabsorbing.
You're reabsorbing, okay, because it's longer in your lungs. Is that what's happening?
That's right. It has to do with the lung dynamics of gas exchange.
Okay, yeah. So the longer if you're breathing deeply, the longer it's going to be in your lungs. Probably the deeper it's going into your lungs, and so that's going to increase the gas exchange to your bloodstream.
Yeah, Robert Fried's book on respiratory physiology is the best book that I've ever run across in terms of dealing with this kind of issue. It's just excellent text, and one of those, rare books that are accessible to people who aren't specialists in the field and aren't academics.
Okay, I actually have a few questions that I don't think anybody's going to be able to answer very well, so I want to ask them to you. Chocolate seems to have a very significant effect on my circadian rhythm, which is very interesting. It seems to lengthen it. I sleep for longer periods, and I'm tired earlier on in the day. Is that something that you would have guessed, or
yes.
Do you know a mechanism? Okay, so what's the mechanism if you have?
Well, actually, you'd probably do okay if you ate chocolate mid-morning. That would be the time that it would least affect you, because chocolate is like coffee. It has a bimodal effect. You get about 2 hours of stimulation, acidification, of mitochondrial uncoupling, basically a thermogenic effect.
Right.
And then for the next 8 hours, you're going to get an alkalinizing effect, because
that's going to make me more sleepy.
Yes.
Okay. So my self-experimentation does validate that. I'll become maybe more stimulated for a couple hours, and then it seems like things are going to start slowing down. Not right away. I won't crash, but things start slowing down.
How about your nap time? Is it about 4 in the afternoon?
I don't take naps anymore.
But do you get mentally unfocused and a little bit less sharp at about 4 in the afternoon?
You know what? I take a lot of stuff. I do a lot of things. So
are you priming yourself at that time?
I don't even know. Like at this stage, I don't even know what's happening. Like, because I kind of make my day and make my my regimen that, okay, let's say if I am starting to feel a little sleepy, I'll do an infrared sauna or a cold shower. I don't if that does happen, and it does, it doesn't even happen so much if my circadian rhythm is really tight. Then I have energy throughout the day. But if it's not tight, and let's say today it probably won't be tight, I don't know what's going to happen. I'll do something like a cold shower to stimulate me, or a sauna, or I'll take a supplement, or I'll drink some kombucha or something. So I alter it artificially. It's hard to know exactly what's happening then naturally. Or what time. And again, it's also going to depend on my circadian rhythm. So the times are going to be different. And it also, I feel like if I take a long walk, I'll be more likely to get a little fatigued. If I combine that with a meal. So a long walk with a meal, I find I will get fatigued after a little. Why do you think that's the case? But again, if my circadian rhythm is solid, then it's not going to happen. What?
There's an alkaline tide of digestion. So anytime you eat, you're going to have a tendency to have your bloodstream significantly alkalinized, because your stomach is generating acid on demand. Okay, so this is a common thing that when people eat, what do they want to do after they've eaten? Smoke a cigarette or drink a cup of coffee.
Right.
Same thing with sex. Sex winds people up, makes them hypermetabolic, and then after orgasm, they go hypometabolic and they want to light up or they want to drink a cup of coffee.
So you're saying so what's the mechanism there? Let's say when orgasming. I know when you orgasm, at first your fight or flight stimulates, and then the parasympathetic stimulates. So you first more awake, and then you just get that rest and digest or feed and breathe feel, and so you're relaxed. You want to take a nap. What do you have?
Mainly males, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So do you have what's the insight there? Why are people getting sleepy after an orgasm?
Well, because their metabolism slows down.
Their metabolism
all of this, the activation that takes place, the build-up to the climax is like exercise. And then when you reach orgasm, you stop, and then the rebound effect will take you in the other direction. It's like a rubber band. You pull it one direction, it's going to rebound the other direction, or a spring. There's an elasticity to our metabolism that has to equal, and sex is an acidification event, and then napping afterwards is an alkalizing event. It's the same thing that the Russian scientists used to do in training their Olympic athletes. They used to say, okay, you go and you just work out really, really hard, and now, no matter what you do, go in here, lie down, and take a nap. So that they would optimize that alkaline rebound, and they would even feed them alkaline amino acids in the form of peptides that were rich in lysine and arginine and things like that to augment that alkaline rebound, because that's when they get their muscle gains and their skeletal strength, and all these kinds of performance enhancements are optimized based on taking advantage of that rebound effect.
So that's why a lot of people get more sleepy with arginine and lysine. It's more relaxing amino acids. That's interesting. You're saying that that's working through the making you more alkalized, and the same with exercise. Maybe you're becoming more acidic, but then you stop, you're more alkalized. So all these things are doing that, and from
you're along for the ride.
Yeah, the way I think about it is metabolism. It's yoked to orexin. Orexin is the central mediator of that, and again, that is definitely this is a lot of hardcore science on this, that it senses the acidity within those cells in the hypothalamus. So which transfers from the bloodstream as well. Yeah.
It's your top-down mechanism for maintaining your health and your well-being and your balance and your responsiveness to your environment. And the bottom-up systems would be, burning carbs, burning fat, what's going on with the mitochondria, with the
So what's happening when you're burning carbs? Because a lot of people get sleepy after carbs, and actually glucose is known to suppress orexin. So I always thought of it as just glucose suppressing orexin. Do you have any additional insights? Are carbs making you more alkalized, or what's
They're
happening?
alkalinizing foods, yeah.
Oh, I see. That's very interesting.
It depends, though. If it's fruit, for example, 99%, 98% of fruit is alkalinizing. And in terms of carbs, all refined carbs are alkalinizing, unless you're allergic to them. So allergy will flip any food the other direction. But
what about whole grains?
They have they're the most acidic of all the non-meat foods. So it's the fat and the polyunsaturated fat content that really makes them as acidifying as they are.
So you're saying people should become more awake by whole grains?
Yes, because for two reasons. One, because of the polyunsaturated fatty acid content, and two, because it's probably the single most allergic food that we regularly consume. That's
interesting. So I find, though, that when I consume something I'm allergic to, I get sleepy. So what's happening there?
Well,
if I eat a lot of whole grains, I'll get sleepy. So
if your body,
I assume that had to do with inflammation, and inflammation suppresses orexin. But it seems like you're saying, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how I would mesh my understanding with yours.
It's a matter of extremes. When you exceed the capacity of your system, you get an opposite reaction. For example, when you are too alkaline, because of low metabolic rate. You take somebody who's hypometabolic, there could be hypothyroid, they could have heavy metal poisoning, but they're
That would have been me.
hypometabolic,
Okay.
and they're eating alkaline foods. They just ate some chocolate, and the chocolate is wearing off. Their urine pH is tracking down. Okay, when they hit a point of alkaline stress that is beyond their adaptive capacity metabolically, their body activates the prostaglandin pathway, and their urine will acidify in 10 to 20 minutes. It'll go from a pH of 7 to 8 to a pH of 5 or 4 or even 3 in that short a period of time.
Wow.
And so anytime you exceed a particular mechanism, you overdrive a mechanism to the point that the body perceives it as a deviation from homeostasis, you will get the opposite effect. So if you're metabolically tuned up and you overdrive your system, your body may shut down.
So I think what used to be the case with me before I increased my metabolism, so I was historically generally lower on the T3 spectrum, and the free T3, total T3, and combined with other factors, I would say I was generally, lower metabolic. I was less metabolically active, and I consumed less calories. So you're saying that my cells are probably more alkalized, and if I were to eat whole grains or carbs or things like that, it will just push it over the edge, and then I'll get tired.
Well, yes, or the pushing it over the edge, though, could be the food itself, which I don't think is likely. But you could potentially investigate that by, for example, measuring your allergy as opposed to, let's say, taking something like molecularly distilled fish oil, which would be a source of polyunsaturated fat that wouldn't have any proteins in it whatsoever. Therefore,
when I take that, I become more awake. So what happens?
Okay, then that would suggest to me that your reaction to the grain is allergic.
Oh yeah, I think it is allergic. So
yeah.
So what do you think is happening? The inflammation is causing a suppression of orexin. How are you tying that into the alkaline?
Your body is putting all of its energy into your immune system rather than putting it into mind and digestion and other capacities. This is one of the things that I can say is a good rubric for thematic understanding of health and wellness, is that inflammation and healing are mutually exclusive.
Right.
So anytime you go into inflammation, your healing goes to zero, and you defer all your healing. And that's fine if you're going to have 2 days of inflammation.
So my metabolism...
it's a disaster if it's 2 months or 2 years.
My metabolism is getting shunted towards my immune system, which is very metabolically hungry, and it's going away from my brain. And so maybe in that case, if that were the case, then maybe we'd also be seeing a shift in where the acid and alkalinization is in the cell. So maybe in my hypothalamus it's more alkalized, and in my immune system it's more acidic. Does that happen?
Not that I'm aware of. I
so
suppose
you think
it's
it's
possible,
uniform?
but I think the acid and alkaline systems are compartmentalized to blood, interstitial fluids, and the cellular cytoplasm, and then the subcellular compartments, mitochondria and the nuclei, and other organelles.
Are they all related, or they're all very different?
They're all potentially totally different.
They're all potentially totally. So you can have alkalized.
The most common thing
place.
that I'll see in hypometabolic people relates to fluid accumulation in the tissues and cellular dehydration. So people who have this alkaline tendency or hypometabolic will tend to have a overutilization of potassium at the cellular level and an underutilization of water at the cellular level, which causes the opposite reaction in the tissues. So you will see, for example, their serum potassiums will go down and their cellular potassiums will go up. At the same time, water is doing the opposite. So what happens when you have dehydrated tissues? Your brain shrinks in your skull and you get fluid around your brain. So that's recognized as a sign of Alzheimer's disease. And they think this is a permanent atrophy. I think it's just a metabolic indicator. As soon as you fix it, their brain will swell back up again, and the fluid in the brain will be absorbed by the cell.
That could certainly be one very significant factor. Yeah, but I would say that there's a whole bunch of others.
But from a point of view of whether you have puffiness under your eyes, whether you have your throat in passages when you're sleeping, you're snoring, or even worse, the metabolic imbalance goes to the next extreme and you have apnea events because of that extra fluid in your tissues, blocking your airway.
That's interesting.
Or you have swollen ankles. All of this is a sign of that same kind of metabolic imbalance.
What do you think of, I've been also trying to figure this out. So whenever I eat something I'm allergic to, I notice that I'm not breathing as well. So my nose clogs a little. Like, what's happening there? Fluid. It seems like I'm not taking in oxygen that well. What's the mechanism?
I don't know.
It seems like it would have related to something you just said.
I mean, that's a personal sensitivity issue with me is sinuses.
Okay, fine.
And upper respiratory issues.
So what's
this has been plaguing me my entire life, and it's never changed. Even though I take more vitamin A and zinc and stuff, to mitigate it and help control it, and I'll use colloidal silver in a nebulizer. So I've got all these adaptive compensatory strategies that allow me to survive with it just fine. But I still recognize it as a constitutional weakness.
So what do you think that's from? Maybe you haven't tried to eliminate enough foods, or maybe
that could be, yes.
That's why I developed.
I'm living in an environment where I have mold spores or animal dander or something like that I'm reacting to. It could be relating to pollen.
Right. Yeah, of course. That's why I developed a certain diet, like a lectin avoidance diet, and also an elemental diet, so that not that you want to keep it necessarily for your whole life, but it's a good framework for which to identify food sensitivities, and it's helped me tremendously. So as long as I stay away from that food, I'm breathing well all day. No post-nasal drips, nothing like that. Don't get tired after I'm eating, really.
That means that's something that you play to. Somebody who's got migraine headaches, it's like, the end of the world for them. And, somebody else who's got a, dementia, okay, whatever that primary issue is, you're going to look at the world that way, and you're going to respond to your body's language that way because that's how it's talking to you. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this is all, fascinating, and it's extremely complex. I mean, just figuring out the different pHs of different tissues and how they're affecting different things. It's something I'm going to definitely pay more attention to, but it's definitely, I feel like it's going to just go over the head of a bunch of listeners. Like, wait a second, acidic where, here, there, all over the place. It's
very complicated, and all I can say is that, it's better not to get stressed out by it, because there's infinite capacity for worrying about things that, you can always pick on something, and that's very, bad for your neuroendocrine system. It disempowers you. It's
makes you feel
helpless. One thing I've learned is that ignorance expands more faster than knowledge does. Every time I can answer a question, that allows me to ask 2 more questions.
At least.
So, you can't win that kind of game.
No, that's I'm trying to get ahead of it, but it's not happening. But I'm talking to people like you, and all that's happening is I'm asking more questions. I'm like, no, all the alkalization, what's happening?
That's right.
So I think I have some good ideas, some good frameworks, and I think, understanding it on a basic level, like your hypothalamus does detect the level of acidity in your hypothalamic cells at least, and increasing, and I find that when I intake certain foods like lactic acid from kombucha or maybe apple cider vinegar, that's going to increase your wakefulness or even deep breathing could increase your wakefulness by increasing the acidity of your blood, and more specifically your hypothalamus, and that's going to increase metabolism via orexin. To me, that's the most simplified way without stressing myself out. So what would you say about okay, so many questions, wow. I thought I was going to be like, we'll get to a whole bunch of questions later, but you say something and I'm like, I got to ask him about that. It's really bad.
Okay, let it roll.
All right. So what about this is something that's spoken about a decent amount in the health sphere, taking melatonin. And I used to recommend it, and I think it has its role for some people at some times. And I used to take it as well, but I do find that, again, if you can get your circadian rhythm optimized, it could even be worse taking it because, again, like Dr. Jack Kruse says, whatever you make yourself, whatever you're supposed to be making, you shouldn't be ingesting. I think that's a general rule, and I like it to a certain extent. So something like melatonin, I feel like if I wear the red glasses, I'm going to be producing that myself, and that's going to be increasing. It's going to be interacting with a whole bunch of systems in my brain, which are important. So the act of producing it probably has an effect. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's balancing. But you've said you've experimented with that. What's your take on? I
still do.
Okay, so what's your take on that? Some people don't react well to it.
On average, once a week.
Oh, okay, fine. So you're not afraid that it's...
I've discovered that the best form of melatonin for me is liposomal melatonin because it actually gives me a hypnotic effect that I don't get. So if I use the liposomal melatonin and I'm doing my night owl thing, I can override that with liposomal melatonin.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you don't think that's a problem? You're happy taking melatonin at night? You don't. I think it does have some effect, and I think it sets your circadian rhythm, obviously, so it's beneficial, more beneficial than not if you're not keeping to your circadian rhythm. But my personal take is that if you can keep to your circadian rhythm and you can wear those red glasses at night, that's a much better system. Would you agree with that?
If it works for you, absolutely. The thing that I would say is that melatonin isn't about your circadian rhythm, it's from your circadian rhythm. And it is a signal to your body tissues to go through some kind of metabolic state, repair process, hibernation, lowering of energy, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And therefore, like most things, that doing it on an intermittent basis is probably minimally destabilizing in the same way that exercise for strength training, you don't want to do it every day.
Right. I see what you're saying.
At least the same muscle that you have, you want to give that rebound effect an opportunity to play. So you work out one day and then you consolidate the gains, and then you 2 days later, you do it again, or 3 days later you do it again, and then you consolidate the gains. And so I find that the melatonin and the tryptophan cocktail with predigested collagen protein work better if I do them intermittently. If I take periods of gaps between them. And I find that that also applies to all the growth hormone stimulants that are out there. That if you push growth hormone all the time, it stops working.
Right. Have you ever tried wearing the red glasses? Like, have you ever experimented wearing that for like 4 hours before bed?
I didn't. I did it with some plastic, which was very inconvenient. It might be better if it was more convenient. I did it with plastic. And
what does that mean, plastic?
Tinted plastic.
Oh, okay. So you had glasses, and you just put tinted glasses.
That's right. I just stretched a piece of plastic across my eyes.
Did it block out the? It blocked out the blue light. You tested it on like a blue light, and it blocked it out.
It didn't block it all out. It just shifted the spectrum. It just dramatically dropped the blue without affecting the red.
So I would be curious what would happen if you, because they do sell red glasses that don't block out the blue. They just diminish it a little. And I found red glasses that completely block it out, blue and green. I'm curious how you would feel on that, to know, you never. It doesn't seem like you ever really tried it out very properly. And
right.
Also blocking it out, making sure you have no artificial light coming from on top. Doing it, at night, every night. 7 o'clock hits maybe, and then you start wearing it, and you maybe go to sleep at 11. I'd be curious how that affected you, rather than...
Me too. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
The same kind of issue that, there are people who are, nerds who like to reverse engineer all this kind of stuff. And I'm certainly one of those. But
me too.
Most of my clients aren't. And
I see. Yeah, I get a lot. Yeah.
It's much better for me to talk to them in terms of, not like wearing glasses, but just setting up, for example, automatic light exposure systems that are set on timers so that they don't have to worry about it. It takes care of itself. so that at 7 o'clock at night, this particular light turns off and this light turns on, and then at 2 hours later that this red LED system turns on, and then at 45 minutes later the main illumination light turns off, where everything is set to operate to keep them entrained, because otherwise they're not paying attention to it. It's too intrusive in their life to do it.
Yeah, I've found a lot of resistance from people. Like, what? Unless they have serious problems, they're like, so I got to wear these red glasses, and then they got to go out with them. And if they have glasses, they can't see. It's really disturbing to a lot of people's lifestyle. But unfortunately, I mean, I'm a much bigger proponent. I think they have a very significant effect based on my reading and understanding, and my own experimentation. But again, it's a lot of it's also based on my understanding that I do stress it, and I try to push it on people, because people who have a lot of issues, they have to, you cannot be putting on Band-Aids. And for me, in my opinion...
No, you can. You can be putting on Band-Aids, and most people do.
But they don't get better. They don't get completely better.
It doesn't matter. That's it. If it helps them with their coping, they get a short-term feedback that reinforces that behavior. So, the point is that no matter how effective a cure is, if somebody won't do it, it's not going to be of any benefit.
Yeah, it's true. And a lot of times I'm hard on people. I'm saying, like, you got to do, because the people I deal with happen to have a lot of serious issues, and I feel the body is working as a system, where if you just have one ingredient in the system, it's not going to make the system better. You have to incorporate multiple ingredients to make sure the whole system is working properly. And I've had my experience where people did try to just do one or two things, and it didn't help them enough that they even noticed it. But when people really incorporate a whole system, that's when they start seeing the effects, and then they're like, wow, okay, this stuff is really working. Rather, if they just include one or two things, it's also a hit or miss, because it's impossible to know what the top thing is going to be for each individual. It's hard to guess what's going to give the person the biggest bang for their buck. But also, again, I feel like it needs to be a systemic approach, because they have a new homeostasis where their whole system is out of whack. And my approach is, once you get that system normalized, then you can do whatever you want. And if it gets out of whack again, at least you have a systemic approach to make it normalized again. So
I look at my job more that when I'm talking with a client, I need to hit a home run first at bat.
Right, or else they get
pick something that is, I think, critical in their particular system,
and that they can do.
Two, that they will actually do it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm always looking at, is what will they do, what will they won't do. So I need to make that judgment. Two, what's the most likely major thing that can be addressed with whatever investment they have at that particular point in time. Even if it's small, if they only have a small amount of investment, then they're only going to get a small amount of gain. It may not be that much, but if it's enough to suck them into a process,
I see what you're saying.
Then it ends up winning for them.
I'm conflicted with both of those approaches, because on the one hand, I want to get people better, and I want them to see very significant effects. And some people are just not self-aware enough to notice small effects. I was self-aware enough to notice small effects, but a lot of people aren't. It's just kind of like, well, I'm still fatigued all day,
You're a classic rational dominant person, and the problem is that that's a minority position in this planet. It's a
minority position. I agree.
When you're dealing with somebody who's not a rational dominant, they're not gonna be aligned the way you are.
Yeah, classic INTJ. I'm like, what do you mean? This is rational. You want to get better? You gotta, like, what? You want to be sick or something? What's the choice here? What? I don't understand. What's the decision? How does it not make sense to do it? But yeah, that's not how people are like.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. A lot of interesting things. What about again? This is another. This is another question that I'm asking you, because I'm just afraid a lot of people won't have the answer to it. Why would some people get tired from B12 and B6? I thought it was only me, but some people get tired and some people get very stimulated. I kind of have theories, but nothing I think is pretty relevant that much.
Well,
What do you?
B6 and B12 are the two B vitamins that are acidifying, or catabolic, or aerobic.
So that would suggest that people are getting more awake from it, and most people do. So most of the
That's right.
time,
Most
it's best to
people do.
take it in the morning.
Yeah.
It helps reset your circadian rhythm, especially B12.
Yeah.
So,
So if you're leaning this way, moving this way will help you and focus you and all that. But if you're leaning this way, going that way is too
so what
much.
do you more concretely? What's happening? Why, when someone's taking B12, I can't understand it in like.
Okay, well, if it's what I would do is for somebody like you, as I say, reverse engineer the problem. So I would say, okay, so you're responding to the two B vitamins that are catabolic, aerobic, acidifying. So how about challenging yourself with things that are not water soluble to see if you get the same effect, or with foods that are on that same category. So does N-acetylcysteine do the same thing for you?
No, it increases wakefulness actually a little. So yeah, I mean, but
How about selenium?
no effect really, none that I can notice. But selenium is actually another nutrient that could help, that works with the circadian rhythm. That's very
Yeah, but it's strongly acidifying, aerobic.
Yeah, so I think
catabolic.
the studies show that you should take it in the morning. So maybe that ties into what you're saying.
Yeah, I do it all day by putting it in my drinking water.
Okay, I see. How much do you take, by the
How
way?
about vitamin A? Does taking a high dose of vitamin A or
Retinol?
D?
Retinol or
Yeah.
beta carotene? Retinol. Okay.
Oh, not beta carotene.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the real vitamin A. More I'd say equal. Nothing either way, but more stimulating maybe. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But do you have any framework like why B12 would have such different effects?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the same thing with calcium and magnesium.
So what's happening?
Some people will be sedated by calcium, and other people are energized by calcium, and their response to magnesium will tend to be the opposite. And that has to do with both fast oxidizer, slow oxidizer status in terms of metabolic type, and in terms of sympathetic, parasympathetic type.
So if someone's getting tired from B12, what does that say?
I don't really have a specific thing about it, but to say that they may be catabolic dominant, aerobic, acidifying, catabolic dominant, and that the B12 is merely pushing them into a state of being too dominant
in that way,
in that dimension.
And the body's kind of, has a backstop where you say, okay, let's go the opposite direction and make it alkalizing or something like that. So, I'm talking about the methyl B12. So how would does that change the game? Like, I would say I'm an undermethylator.
Well, if you're, I mean, you can separate the B12 effect from, for example, taking trimethylglycine, which would
I get tired from that as well.
Yeah, so that would suggest
methylation.
That methylation
right.
is
That's
methyl
okay.
dumpers.
I agree. So that's why I was trying to emphasize that. I think it's
well.
the
That's
methyl.
a great example of how you can disassemble a particular kind of reaction and look at all the different things that you know about it to kind of separate them all apart.
So why are some people getting tired from increasing methylation? I guess that's the question.
Oh, I don't know that.
Oh, okay, fine.
You don't have a specific mechanism,
right?
But,
that's what I've been trying to figure out, trying to see like what's going on here. But I guess I was hoping if you don't know the answer, then I'm assuming nobody really knows it.
Oh, that's not true. It just means that I don't know.
Yeah, but that's true. But you're the most likely to know an answer to that question. Maybe Jack Cruz. I bet he knows. He also knows a tremendous amount. But anyway, but usually.
Well, certainly ask Ray Pete.
I disagree with Ray Pete on a lot of issues. I mean, he's obviously.
That's right, but
he obviously knows a lot.
Anytime you have a weird question, he's a really good person to ask.
Yeah. If you could get in contact with him, he kind of like dropped off the face of the earth. He's doing his paintings now. I don't know what he's doing, but But anyway, so I kind of just like I feel like all right, now I just got to dig deeper into the scientific studies on methylation, things like that. But anyway, what about methylation? This is something that I've actually figured out that undermethylators. Why is that bad? I think because it's making people are not the circadian rhythm, the clock genes, they require methylation. And when they're not methylating properly, and also the stress response, you could shut off the HPA axis if you methylate more. So that's actually one mechanism by maybe which I'm getting tired, actually, by increasing the methylation of the CRH neurons in the hypothalamus. That's decreasing the HPA axis, and that, because the CRH is more stimulatory, that could be causing fatigue. But again, that's probably that's just a theory. But
and it could be that there's an opposite reaction taking place, because if acetylation pathways are pinned one way and methylation pathways are pinned another way, you might have a completely different kind of response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so have you ever thought about like methylation, how it's working with the circadian rhythms? Any insights on that?
I've never observed a connection in all the time I've been looking at these kinds of issues, but you know, hey, it could have just been right over my head, and I just never drew that kind of connection. I don't carry the MTHFR mutation, so I'm fairly fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, I'm homozygous for the 6771. So
okay, yeah. So I mean, again, you look at that kind of issue. I mean, given my ancestry, I would think that I'd be at high risk for the MTHFR variants, but I don't have them. So it may be that my experience with methyl donors and stuff is very much different from other people's. I've run across people who are amazingly sensitive, for example, to relatively small doses of methionine.
Right, right. So how are you impacted by methylation?
I don't seem to have any particular issue with it.
Now I'm saying, do you get stimulated or what?
Minor
stimulation. Okay.
Minor stimulation, but cholinergics drive me up a wall.
Okay, I see. Right. So what about?
It's not pretty.
Right, I see what you're saying.
Dopamine is the same way. My obsessive and compulsive tendencies, whenever I take, eat fava beans or take too much Depronil, flare up, and it gets to the point that it's uncomfortable, and yet. I can recognize a dopaminergic deficit. Now that I'm 63 years old, I'm feeling that. When I was 40 and first experimenting with Depronil, it was like even a milligram a day would drive me nuts.
Yeah, any kind of dopaminergics, I actually get like my mental acuity goes down. So Depronil, even a tiny dosage, like a half a milligram, will just like make me zonked out a little. What is that, because I have too much dopamine?
Probably, or you might just be dopamine dominant, which means if I were you, I would look at serotonin and GABA systems as potential remedies, and that's been the biggest thing for me, is with cholinergic dominance and dopaminergic dominance, and I look for those recessive systems to
the inhibitory systems like GABA.
GABA or serotonin.
Yeah, serotonin is actually stimulatory in some ways, so it's kind of mixed. Yeah.
Well, all of the neurotransmitters have their opposite side, their dark side.
That's true.
So the inhibitory neurotransmitters do have some stimulatory ability, and the excitatory ones do have some inhibitory abilities as well. That's just part of the way the brain is cross-wired with itself to maintain homeostasis. So
you're saying acetylcholine and dopamine also have inhibitory abilities?
Yes.
Okay.
They have inhibitory circuits.
Yeah. Kind of to get into homeostasis, to make sure things don't get overexcited.
For example, the same way that the phosphorylation cycle works in the brain, every 90 seconds we run from under to over phosphorylation. It's because the phosphatases and the kinases that do opposite functions also affect each other, and so the phosphatases that operate at low concentration will work one way, and the ones that operate at a high state of phosphorylation will work the other way. So it creates a metastable system where it goes all the way to one extreme, and that turns it around, and it goes all the way back to the other extreme. And so this is part of one of our biorhythms, and it's only 90 seconds. So it's a pretty fast rhythm, and it's one of the reasons that the human brain uses so high amount of energy compared to other tissues, because this is basically wasted energy. It's not it's not serving a direct metabolic function. It's serving some kind of a biostability function.
Right. So, okay, I just want to get back to one point on the circadian rhythm, and then I'm probably going to move on. Oxidative stress and the circadian rhythm. There was a whole paper on that. I started reading it. I got to get back to it. But basically, I think my understanding is that when metabolism is going to increase oxidative stress, and that's kind of going to signal, to get things moving on, or oxidative stress signals to increase metabolism. How's that working exactly?
Well, metabolism produces oxidative stress.
That's one,
so
right?
There's a direct reaction that way.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a feed-forward kind of system involved in it.
Where oxidative stress is increasing metabolism as well?
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in it. It's easier to pay attention to feedback systems and feed-forward systems, but there are some feed-forward systems. And survival is very critically timed for this sympathetic-parasympathetic response, especially given the fact that we have two parasympathetic arms and not just one. So
what are the two parasympathetic arms, by the way? Are the vagal nerve and one is more?
Well, there's the myelinated vagus and the non-myelinated vagus.
I think there's two other ones, right? I forgot the names.
There's only one sympathetic aspect, but there's
two of them. There's the adrenomedullary axis. That's it's one sympathetic system, and the other is the HPA axis. That's the other one. No?
Yeah, but I'm talking about the direct issue of vagal tone.
Okay, I see.
You have two different aspects to it. So freezing, for example, is a primitive parasympathetic response, but that would be, let's say, common to amphibians and reptiles.
Okay.
But then we have a vagal system that provides a break to both the primitive vagal system, parasympathetic system, and the sympathetic system based on things like our perception of safety.
Okay.
So, which is very high level. You're in a situation with somebody who's trustworthy, you relax with them, your vagal tone increases, and any kind of emergency that might happen tends to be mitigated by the fact that you're with somebody that you trust. They're trustworthy. Whereas if you're with somebody who's, let's say, a narcissist and is, a bully, you're not going to feel safe at all, and therefore both your freezing behaviors, which would be parasympathetic, and your sympathetic fight or flight would be both activated because of that lack of breaking.
Right. Okay, yeah. So let's just get back to the oxidative. So oxidative stress, it's increasing in the day and it's going down at night. And
well, oxidative stress is to some extent defined by a mismatch between oxidants and antioxidant defense. Or actually, you break down the antioxidant defense system into two layers. One of them is strictly antioxidant defense, which is to detoxify reactive oxygen species in a kind of bucket brigade system. And then below that, you have a reduction system, which is,
antioxidants.
It's not antioxidants. It's reductant. It's the opposite of oxidation. The antioxidant system is more like an umbrella protecting you from the sun, and the reduction system is like a refrigerator that's actually generating coldness. Mm-hmm. And so that's the mitochondrial system with NADH production, coupling to NADPH, coupling to vitamin C and glutathione. So your vitamin C and your glutathione pool is in relationship to the amount of oxidative stress that you have.
Right.
And if you don't have enough NADH, NADPH, glutathione, or vitamin C, oxidative stress is going to overwhelm your systems as opposed to handling it gracefully.
Right.
So
yeah, so the NADH and the NADPH, those are the reductants. They're giving over the electrons and neutralizing the free radicals.
They're providing the electrons to the vitamin C and glutathione, which is then cooling off your other antioxidants. So your phenolics, for example, your polyphenols are absorbing free radicals at a high level of energy and dropping it down part way. But ultimately, as the free radicals are handed down in the bucket brigade, they end up getting cooled and quenched by your vitamin C, your vitamin E, and your glutathione.
Mm-hmm. How is oxidative stress interacting with the circadian rhythm?
Well, I've run across people with sleep pathologies where their metabolism drops too low at night. And they will wake up in a state of agitation, anxiety, sometimes even night terrors, but more often just extreme anxiety. They'll be sweating. They'll feel like, somebody's about to break into the house, there's something wrong. And that's just because their metabolism dropped below a level of safety, and their adrenal gland kicked in as a sympathetic defense mechanism to keep them alive.
If they're hot, wouldn't that indicate that their metabolism is increased?
That's right.
Okay,
so as soon as your adrenal
saying,
hormones dump into your system, your metabolism goes through the roof.
Oh, I see. So you're saying the metabolism decreases, and then their HPA axis gets stimulated, and then they start getting hot and night terrors and things like that.
Yeah.
Anxiety. Okay. So, and how does that relate to oxidative stress?
Because their metabolism is dropping below a certain point, their ability to handle oxidative stress is severely compromised.
I see. Okay, because the mitochondria are not working that well. They're not producing those reductants, and they're not able to handle that oxidative stress.
That's right.
That makes a lot of sense.
So fundamentally, your antioxidant defense system is relying more on your mitochondria than it is on your supplements.
Right. That makes that makes a lot of sense, definitely. And the research would show that that's true. Whenever I take things that improve my mitochondria directly, my ability to combat oxidative stress is much more increased rather than if I just take antioxidant supplements.
And the other side of that is if you take antioxidant supplements, all your markers for oxidative stress go up.
Right, because your body's not getting that signaling and producing its own antioxidant system.
And you're potentially unbalancing the bucket brigade of how high-level reactive oxygen species are stepwise dismutated down to the point that they get refrigerated. You have this bucket brigade, and if you're missing some of those steps, then free radicals can accumulate at a particular level, like beta-carotene.
Right.
Carotene in a smoker, you get all these carotene radicals that accumulate, and you have a breakdown.
So how does that bucket brigade go? There's the antioxidants on top, let's say, and the
reducing agents below it.
I can't wrap my head around the bucket analogy, but
think about it as a ladder going from high energy free radicals down to lower and lower and lower energy free radicals.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, what's the so the different free radicals have different levels of oxidant potential,
That's right.
The different levels of oxidants. So is that what you're talking about? Like
yes.
The top.
So if a phenolic compound accepts a free radical, it is now a free radical.
Right.
It's less energetic.
It's less dangerous
source
of a
one, but it's still a free radical and needs to get detoxified further.
I see. So how are you building up the top level free radicals like beta carotene? What's happening when you have too much in the system? You're taking down too much of a certain oxidant in a certain place, maybe,
or it's just getting stuck at a particular place.
Where is it getting stuck? Like
as that free radical. So
beta-carotene in the blood
might have to interact with vitamin E, and if the vitamin E isn't reduced, there's no vitamin E to accept that.
I see what you're saying. So it has to be balanced. It has to have a balanced level of antioxidants like beta-carotene with vitamin E, with glutathione. If you take too much of one, then...
So a good example of that is if you, bucket brigade analogy of putting out a fire. Free radicals would be a fire. And you have a lake, which is your source of water. That's your reducing power. And you've got this line of people, or your antioxidant players, and they're running buckets down the line and then returning buckets back another line. And that's how you're putting out the fire. What happens if you put 4 people at one point in the bucket brigade?
Right.
It breaks down.
Right.
Or what happens if you put a 5-year-old child in the middle of a bucket brigade? It breaks down.
Yeah, I'm always trying to understand on a deeper level why. I know oxidative stress is bad for you. Yeah, antioxidants like beta-carotene, high-dose alpha tocopherol, those are not good for you. So that's interesting. So
it's like tubas.
Right.
Too many tubas spoil the orchestra.
Right. Is it also the case that, let's say, beta-carotene, so it's accepting electrons and then it becomes an oxidant itself? Is that part of it?
Yep.
I see. So not neutralizing the free radicals in a more fundamental way from within the mitochondria, or maybe as Gerald Pollack would say, the structured water inside your cells that are capable of giving over electrons.
Well, that's a reservoir of electrons.
Yeah. So the water itself.
And water is different when it's loaded with, when it's reduced in a reduced environment. It behaves differently than when it's in an oxidized environment.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I bet a lot of listeners, they got their head spinning. They're like, "What is going on already?" I could talk to you for who knows how long. We didn't even get to
half the questions.
Not even half. It's not a joke. Okay, but it's, the fun has to end at some point. Okay, so we'll just end it here, and hopefully maybe in like a few months' time we can talk again, or whatever. Okay, okay. So,
it's been fun.
It's been fun. Where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you, or?
Project Wellbeing is the best place to go. ProjectWellbeing.com. I have a hub page there, the Steve page, that has links to SERI. It has links to my, periodic table, the book on antiviral therapies, the Down syndrome collection. There's just all those links that are present there.
Okay, fine. And
they can always just, the phone numbers are included. They can give me a call.
Okay.
They can email me.
And that's how they'll get in touch with you if they want to do a consult or anything like that. Okay, that's
Steve
great.
At Project Wellbeing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's easy.
That's fantastic. Again, looking forward.
So maybe we can talk about Alzheimer's disease next time.
Oh yeah, we got a lot to talk about next time. It's just the circadian rhythm really got to me, and I was like, I got to dig in and ask the questions that I didn't think other people would necessarily be able to answer. Okay, fine.
Well, sleep problems and circadian rhythm problems are probably some of the most universal aspects of health problems in our current society.
In complete agreement with that. That's why I'm focusing on it in this interview, other interviews, and increasingly on my blog. So, yeah.
Good.
Great stuff. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we'll be in touch, all right?
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.